It's a rainy Sunday morning, and you are sitting on the couch, doing nothing. Not for hours, not for days, but months. Why? Because nobody wants you. You don't have any experience or authority. Why would Argentina hand the job to someone who couldn't even direct traffic? And are you going to rebuild the most cursed nation in the world? Lionel Scaloni retired in 2015 at Atalanta in Italy. He was a right-back who had had a long, honest career without ever once being the star. He had won a league title in Spain years before. He had played a World Cup in 2006, but he was never the face on the poster. He was the guy who did the unglamorous work, the running nobody notices. Then it was over, and he went home to Mallorca to a life most people would trade anything for. Sun, family, a bike, the sea. On paper, paradise. But here's the thing nobody warns you about the after. When you have spent 30 years chasing a ball, freedom can feel a lot like being lost. He would sit on that couch some afternoons and not know what to do with his own hands. The cheering was gone. The purpose went with it. You wake up one day and the thing that told you who you were just isn't there anymore, and no amount of money in the bank fills that hole. Anybody who has ever retired from something they loved knows the feeling. So when a small club nearby asked him to help with their youth team, he said yes just to have somewhere to be. Sun Caliu in Calvia, little kids mostly. And here's what the people who work there still say about him. He was the first to arrive at training and the last to leave. Not because anyone was filming, because that pitch was the only place the emptiness let go of him. Those kids gave him back something he thought was gone for good. Watching them get a little better every week, watching them fall in love with the game the way he once had, it lit a fire he had assumed had burned out. In 2017, he went to Spain to earn his coaching license. His professor on that course was a man named Luis de la Fuente. Hold on to that name. It comes back at the end of this story in a way almost nobody could have guessed. Then an old friend called Jorge Sampaoli. He wanted Scaloni on his staff, first at Sevilla, then with the national team. And just like that, he wasn't coaching children on a dusty pitch anymore. He was standing on the touchline at the 2018 World Cup in Russia. Russia was a disaster. France knocked them out in the round of 16, 4-3. In a wild game, Argentina could barely lay a glove on. Messi walked off that field like a man who'd emptied himself and got nothing back. He'd already tried to quit the national team once, after another final that ended in tears. The whole thing was cracked right down the middle, and when it fell apart in Russia, Sampaoli was gone within weeks.
Huge thanks to our sponsor OK Jersey. If you're looking to add high-quality kits to your collection, from the latest 2026 season to iconic retros, they've got you covered starting at just £15. Please use my promo code MAUS to get an 8% discount.
Then the strangest thing happened. They went looking for a new coach, and one by one, everybody said no. Simeone said no, Gallardo said no, Pochettino said no. The biggest Argentine managers on earth looked at that job, at that pressure, at Messi's weight and Maradona's shadow hanging over everything, and they didn't want to touch it. And honestly, who could blame them? Argentina had become a place where reputations went to die. So the federation turned to the man already inside the building. Scaloni, 40 years old, not a single game as a head coach. A caretaker, they said, just until they found somebody real. Nobody was happy about it. And the loudest voice belonged to a god. Diego Maradona said Scaloni couldn't even direct traffic, never mind the national team, and asked if the whole country had lost its mind. He heard every word of it, and he took the job anyway. His first match in charge was September 2018. Argentina beat Guatemala 3-0 out in Los Angeles. Messi wasn't even there. It was just Scaloni, a handful of young players, and a country that had already decided he was a mistake waiting to happen. But under the radar, and this matters, they won 4 of his first 6 games. Nobody was watching closely because nobody expected it to mean anything. The federation kept looking for a bigger name, and when they couldn't find one who'd say yes, They gave him the job for real. The couch had been comfortable. This was terrifying. But for the first time in 3 years, terrifying felt like being alive. You have to understand what Scaloni was actually walking into. It wasn't just a team that kept losing finals. It was a house that had rotted from the roof down. For 35 years, Argentine football was ruled by one man, Julio Grondona. He took over the federation back in 1979 under a military dictatorship, and he never let go of it. His gold ring was engraved with 2 words: Todo pasa, everything passes, everything except him. He used to tell reporters that nobody was kicking him out until the day he died, and nobody ever did. He was also a senior vice president of FIFA, the man who sat on top of its money, and after he died in 2014, the truth started leaking out. Investigators in the biggest corruption case football has ever seen named him a central figure. A Swiss banker stood up in a New York court and admitted to funneling millions of dollars in bribes to him for television deals alone. He'd been gone a full year before it all broke open, so he never once sat in a courtroom. Everything passes. And when he finally died, the whole thing collapsed behind him. The federation tried to elect a new president, and the vote came back 38 to 38 in more votes than there were people in the room allowed to cast them. That is not a joke. That is what Argentine football had become. Grondona's own successor was later charged with fraud. Now put yourself in a player's boots inside all of that. The men running the game treated the national team like a business, not a family. Coaches came and went through a revolving door. Bielsa, a brilliant, obsessive man, took a golden generation into the 2002 World Cup as favourites, and Argentina crashed out in the first round, beaten by England, and the country never fully got over it. After him came Peckerman, then Basile, then Maradona himself, then Batista, then Sabella, then Martino, then Bauza, then Sampaoli. Coach after coach after coach. Nobody ever stayed long enough to build a single thing, and the greatest player who ever lived was stuck in the middle of that storm. There were tournaments where Messi started games on the bench while the whole thing fell apart around him. There were nights he flew halfway across the world, got hurt, got blamed, and flew home to a country ready to burn his shirt. By 2016, he'd had enough, and he walked away in tears. And honestly, could you blame him? He had given that federation everything, and all it ever handed back was chaos. That was the house they gave Scaloni, cursed on the field, rotten off it. Everybody kept saying they needed a bigger name to fix it. Scaloni thought they needed something else completely. They needed to stop behaving like a business and start behaving like a family. And he knew exactly where families in Argentina are built, around a fire. The first thing Scaloni did was choose his people, not famous names, not big egos. He called old teammates, men who'd bled in the same shirt he had. Pablo Aimar, the player so many of the kids in that squad had grown up worshipping, Messi included. Walter Samuel, a defender who feared absolutely nothing in his life. Roberto Ayala, all that calm and all that experience. Martin Tacali for the goalkeepers. He wanted men who understood what that shirt does to a person. Men who'd already carried the weight and wouldn't flinch when it landed on them again. No politics, no noise, just loyalty and one shared idea of how they wanted to live. Aimar was the key. The kids in that squad had grown up with his poster on their walls, the same way they'd grown up with Messi's, and he could talk to them in a language no outsider ever could. When Pablo Aimar tells a young Argentine he believes in him, that young man believes it too, because you have to understand what they were walking into. Before Scaloni, this team had climbed the mountain and been thrown off it over and over. They lost the 2014 World Cup final to Germany, minutes from the trophy. They lost the 2015 Copa final on penalties. They lost the 2016 Copa final on penalties again. And that night Messi wept and said he was finished. A World Cup final and 2 Copa finals gone in 3 years. A golden generation with nothing to show for it, and a whole country convinced the players were cursed. You could see what it had done to them. These were world-class footballers who tightened up the second they pulled on that shirt, because every one of them had felt the whole nation's disappointment land on their chest at least once. Fear, like that, doesn't leave a locker room on its own. Somebody has to walk in and change the air. So when Scaloni took over, nobody in those stands was dreaming. They were bracing for the pain. Every time Argentina lined up, you could feel it come down off the terraces. Here we go again. He knew no speech was going to fix that, so he did the boring things instead. He built the team around humility rather than stars. He told them the group came before any single name, even the greatest name that ever played the game, and he gave the young ones a real chance. Rodrigo de Paul, Lautaro Martinez, Giovanni Lo Celso. Soon after, a kid named Cuti Romero, players with hunger but without the old scars. And he went to see Messi. Nobody's claiming he worked some kind of magic, but he told Messi the truth, that they wanted to build something around him that took weight off his shoulders instead of stacking more on, that he could just go and play again and let the rest of them carry their share. Slowly, Messi came back, not the exhausted man dragging a nation behind him alone, a lighter one, surrounded by younger players who would run through a wall for him. That relationship became the whole thing. Get it right, and everything else had a chance. Get it wrong, and none of the rest would have mattered. Their first real test was the 2019 Copa America, and it went exactly the way the doubters promised it would. Argentina lost to Brazil in the semi-final, third place. To the outside world, more proof of the curse. More proof that a man with 7 caps and a few months of experience was in over his head. The headlines were brutal. People questioned his squad picks, his substitutions, whether he had any business standing on that touchline at all. But inside the group, something else was happening that the cameras couldn't see. These boys weren't breaking apart. They were binding together. The fans even gave them a nickname, half as a joke at first. The Scalonetta. Like a rattly little bus that had no business moving but somehow kept rolling forward. They laughed at that name. Scaloni loved it, because a bus carries everybody at once, and together was the only way they were ever going to survive what was coming. In Argentina, there's a word, Kabbalah. A Kabbalah is a superstition you turn into a ritual. If something good happened the last time, you do it exactly the same way the next time. The same shirt, the same seat on the bus, the same road to the stadium. You don't question it, and you never change it. Because deep down, you believe it's part of why things went right. Every Argentine grows up with their own little Kabbalahs. For this team, it became a fire and a grill. The asado, the barbecue. It's the most sacred thing they have back home. And it isn't fast. You stand around the coals for hours while the meat cooks slow, and you talk and you argue and you laugh, and by the end of the night, you know each other in a way no training drill could ever give you. So Scaloni made it theirs, not a one-off, a rule. Before the big matches, they light the grill, and the entire delegation eats together. Not just the starters, every single person, the kitmen, the cooks, the president of the federation, the young kid who might not play a single minute all tournament, all of them around the same fire. And everybody has a job, and the jobs never change, because that is the Kabbalah. The team chef, Diego, runs the grill. Dibu Martinez films the whole thing and shares it with the fans. Lautaro handles the music. Giuliano is the one who tastes the meat first. When they flew to Qatar in 2022, they didn't only pack their boots. They shipped over 2.5 tons of Argentine beef and their own grills, so that on the far side of the world, these players could still feel like they were home. People on the outside laughed at it, a squad of millionaires standing around a barbecue. But that fire did something no tactics board ever could. It took players from 20 different clubs, from different generations, who barely knew each other, and it turned them into brothers. It gave them nights nobody in that group will ever forget. And when you'd walk through fire for the man beside you, you defend differently. You run 1 more meter for him. You don't let each other drown. If they're a group, Scaloni keeps telling them, then they're stronger. That's the whole thing. That's the entire secret. And it's not really a secret at all. This tournament, the Fire even started playing tricks on them. In Kansas City, a storm rolled in right after their first asado, a real one, tornado warnings and all. Then it happened again before the next game. So of course the players decided the rain was part of the Kabbalah now too, and nobody was allowed to complain about it. That's how it works. You laugh, you point at the sky, and you feel a little more untouchable than you did the day before. Silly? Maybe. But a group that laughs together at the same fire is a group that trusts each other on the grass. And trust is the thing that wins the games nobody thinks you can win. And here's the moment that proved it had truly worked. Not long ago, Argentina had a qualifier high up in the mountains, and Scaloni decided to rest Messi. He wasn't going to play a single minute. He didn't have to be anywhere near that bench. But the greatest footballer who ever lived filled out a form to register himself as one of the assistant coaches, just so the rules would let him sit with the group for the match. One of the players put it perfectly afterward. He said that was leadership too. Messi knew he wasn't playing, and he still wanted to be there with his brothers. Sit with what that means. This is a man other coaches once left on the bench like a spare part. Inside a setup so broken he walked away from it in tears, and now, in the family Scaloni built, he fills out paperwork just to be allowed on the bench, playing or not, because he can't stand to be anywhere else. That was never going to show up on a stat sheet, but it's the reason for everything that came next. After that defeat to Brazil, Argentina simply stopped losing. Not for a game or two, for 3 years. They went 36 matches without a single loss, and slowly the bracing in the stands started turning into something that felt dangerously close to hope. In 2021, they reached the Copa America final, and of all the places on earth, it was in Brazil, at the Maracanã against Brazil, the one country that had broken their hearts the most, on their own sacred ground, in front of their own people. Angel Di Maria, one of the men who had lived through every one of those lost finals, lifted the ball over their keeper in the first half. And then, Argentina defended that lead with their lives. When the final whistle blew, they had done it. Argentina's first major trophy in 28 years. Messi dropped to the ground. Grown men on Scaloni's own staff were sobbing next to him. This was Messi's first title with Argentina. After every final, every insult, every night they swore he wasn't enough for that shirt. Aymar, standing beside Scaloni, completely broke down, and it made sense. He had loved this player since they were both kids. Now he had helped set him free. That night cracked something open. The weight didn't disappear, but it broke. And you could see the change in the players almost overnight. They'd stopped being a team afraid to lose. They'd become a team that expected to win. The next year they beat Italy 3-0 to win the Finalissima at Wembley. And then came the match everything had been building toward for a lifetime. Qatar, the 2022 World Cup. And they nearly threw it away in the very first game. Saudi Arabia beat them 2-1. The unbeaten run, gone in 90 minutes. A whole country back on the edge of the cliff overnight. Every old fear came roaring back in an instant. "Here we go again," they said, louder than ever. Scaloni stood in that locker room and gave the players the only truth he had. Nothing was finished. They just had to win every single game from here, one at a time, or fly home in shame. He told them to look at each other, not at the noise outside, and reminded them that the people who loved them were already in that room. So that is exactly what they did. Match after match. No room for a single mistake. The pressure climbing higher every night they survived. And it carried them all the way to the final against France, against Mbappe. It's hard to talk about that match without a racing heart. Argentina went 2-0 up and they were flying. Messi scored, Di Maria scored, and then, inside a few brutal minutes, Mbappe scored twice and hauled France level. Extra time. Messi again 3-2. Then Mbappe finished his hat-trick from the spot, 3-3. Everything Scaloni had rebuilt now hanging on penalty kicks. And there was Emiliano Martinez, DIBU, a goalkeeper the whole world overlooked just a couple of years earlier, standing on that line like he'd been born for it. Deep in extra time, with the score level and seconds left, France broke through and had the World Cup on their boot, one touch from winning it. And Dibu threw out a leg and clawed it away. A save that still doesn't look real on replay, in the biggest moment the game has. Then the whistle blew, and it all came down to penalties. That's the cruelest way there is to end a final. Everything Argentina had built over 4 years, every asado, every comeback, every night they refused to break, now resting on 5 kicks. And once again, there was Dibu, dancing on his line, getting inside the heads of grown men, saving one and turning the whole shootout Argentina's way. When the last penalty hit the net, 36 years of waiting fell off a nation's back in a single instant. Messi lifted the World Cup over his head. The kid they'd once called too cold to lead, held up on the shoulders of men who'd have walked into fire for him. They were never supposed to win any of it. That's the part nobody outside that group ever understood. The pressure that was supposed to crush them was the very thing that welded them into brothers. Scaloni stood on that field in Lusail, a man who 18 months of retirement had nearly turned into a ghost, holding a World Cup winner's medal, unable to speak. So was Aymar. So was every one of them. They just held on to each other. You'd think that would have been enough. It wasn't. In 2024, Argentina went back to the Copa America, and they won it again. Back to back. They beat Colombia in the final, even after Messi limped off in tears with a wrecked ankle, because by then this team didn't need him on the field to remember exactly who they were fighting for. Lautaro came off the bench and settled it late, and the captain lifted the trophy watching from the sideline. 2 Copas and a World Cup in 3 years from a group that couldn't win a single final in the decade before Scaloni got there. And that's the part Scaloni is proudest of. It had stopped being about one player or one coach or one lucky run of results. It became who they simply are. He changed what that shirt does to a man. It used to mean fear. Now it means you fight for everything and you expect to win it. That brings the story to right now. This tournament, in 2026, on American soil, defending the crown they won in Qatar. It has been brutal on the heart. Argentina have won every match, but almost never the easy way. A tiny nation called Cape Verde forced them to extra time. Egypt had them dead and buried, 2 goals down with minutes left, before they somehow found 3. Switzerland dragged them to extra time with a man sent off. And then England, 5 minutes from knocking them out of the semi-final in Atlanta, before Enzo struck in the 85th minute and Lautaro headed in the winner in the 92nd. On every one of those nights, Scaloni looks down his bench and sees them, the forgotten legends. Aymar, the bridge between the old Argentina and the new one. Samuel and Ayala, all that hard-won wisdom standing beside him. Dibu in goal, still saving the impossible. De Paul, Enzo, Mac Allister, boys who bought in when the whole world was laughing at them. And a 39-year-old Messi, still doing whatever he wants, whenever he decides to. 8 goals and 4 assists at this tournament, at an age when most players are long retired and sitting on a couch of their own. None of these men were supposed to be legends. Dibu was a backup goalkeeper for most of his career. De Paul was written off in Europe more than once. Half the staff were players history barely remembers. That's the whole point. They built a giant out of people the game had forgotten, and that giant refuses to die. Now Argentina stand 1 game away from something no team has managed in 64 years. Win on Sunday, and they become the first side to defend a World Cup since Brazil did it in 1962. And there's one last thing almost too strange to script. The team standing across from them in that final is Spain. And Spain is coached by a man named Luis de la Fuente. The same Luis de la Fuente who was Scaloni's professor back in 2017, when he was nothing but a retired defender with a fresh coaching license and no clue what was coming. His old teacher on the opposite bench in a World Cup final. If someone had told Scaloni that while he sat lost on his couch in Mallorca all those years ago, he'd have laughed them straight out of the house. The two of them are friends. Before the tournament, they even joked that if either one slipped up, they might run into each other somewhere along the way. Neither slipped. And now the man who taught Scaloni how to be a coach is standing between him and history. There's something almost too perfect about it. The retired defender nobody wanted, against the professor who once graded his homework, 90 minutes from the trophy that decides everything. Spain have been the team of the tournament. They've barely conceded a goal. Everyone outside Argentina expects them to win, which, if you've been listening to this story at all, is exactly where this team likes to be. So here's the question this whole story keeps asking. What do you do when your career ends? When the money is already in the bank, and the sofa is soft, and the whole world keeps playing without you? For a while, Scaloni thought the answer was nothing. He thought the best years of his life were behind him, and all that was left to do was sit and watch. He was so wrong. The best part hadn't even started yet. It was waiting on a dusty little pitch with a bunch of neighbourhood kids who reminded him why he ever loved any of this. It was in a locker room full of men everyone had written off, himself included. It was in a whole country slowly learning how to breathe again. Think about how close he came to just staying on that couch. How easy it would have been to say no when they called, to decide the pressure wasn't worth it, to let the best years of his life pass by on a screen. The players everyone had forgotten needed someone who'd also been forgotten to believe in them. Maybe that's why it worked. None of them had anything left to lose. Whatever happens on Sunday, win or lose, nobody can ever take this away from them. They took a giant that the whole world had already buried, and they brought it back to life. Now go watch the other story, the one about the men who cry every time they say Messi's name, or click this one instead. Either way, stay for the final.